Good afternoon. I'm Lee Phillips, and this is Visible Gains Live. Thank you. My guest today is Ken Wax. He's the principal at Ken Wax & Associates, and Ken has something we all want, expertise in shortening sales cycles and building incremental revenue. You know, he's done just that for everyone from tiny entrepreneurial startups to giants like IBM, Monster.com, Progress Software, and Accenture. Ken is a writer with many, well over 100 magazine articles to his credit. He publishes a blog on selling by Ken Wax at kenwax.blogspot.com. If you wish, you can follow Ken on Twitter at Ken Wax or connect with him at LinkedIn. And for the rest of you, you can reach him by email at kenwax@gmail.com. Ken, welcome to Visible Gains Live.
Thanks very much. Pleasure to be here, Lee.
It's great to have you. Now, Ken, you've spent a lot of time in sales over many years and sales improvement, sales training with organizations. And you've been witness to the change from personal-focused selling to technology-driven selling. I'm wondering, from your perspective and your vantage point, how those changes appear.
Well, the biggest change is that for the first time since the dawn of business, customers no longer need salespeople to learn about things. This is the first change, and it's undermined a lot of classic selling techniques, in that it used to be, if you had a new product and I wanted to learn about it, I had to meet with a salesperson. Those meetings would develop a relationship. That relationship would eventually perhaps lead to a sale. Not any longer. Now, I may never get to meet you. If a new product comes out, it's on the website right away. I can get specifics, I can get stats. I don't need salespeople. So a salesperson who's been trying to sell by informing, which is how most people have been selling, is in trouble because I don't need information from you anymore. I need something more.
So technology in this case has really stepped in to take away part of the selling process.
It swiped it out.
Took it away.
And it did it quietly, subtly. It was about, I'm going to say about 5 or 6 years ago, websites reached a critical mass.
Right.
Until then, there was stuff being put in, then all of a sudden, one day, they had it all. They had enough information, they had enough of the specs that customers wanted, they had the frequently asked questions. You could now serve yourself, raising the question of, well, exactly what do I need to meet with my salesperson for? And then it got more complex because at the same time, life got busier, more hectic. There's more things to do. Do I have the time to meet with salespeople? And the answer more and more was, not really. Can't we do this through email? So the whole construct of relationships, the rug was yanked out from underneath it.
But now, certainly, there must have been some changes brought about technology that were favorable to selling.
Absolutely. It's made communications faster, cheaper. I could interact with you several times from afar. So it's brought magic. I mean, email alone, what's the magic of that, is being able to connect with someone even if they're tied up in meetings. But then along comes the other side of the coin, which is, I don't just have email, I also have instant messages. I also have my phone beeping. I also have all these distractions. And the biggest problem is that technology doesn't care who's using it. So if I'm trying to use technology to advance my relationship with you, an existing customer, at the same time, there are other people out there with new companies who are trying to get into you. And you know what? They have the exact same technology at the exact same almost free costs.
Now, just as technology has changed the sales side of the equation, I suspect that you would observe that there have been changes in both B2B and B2C buyers brought about by technology as well. How would you characterize what you've seen develop there?
Well, it's not just the technology, it's what technology has brought or taken away. And what I mean by that is, when things started getting hectic and fast-paced and everything was working in the late 90s, something vanished quietly from business. The whole concept of mentoring. In the past, as people would be within organizations, they would either directly or indirectly have people they could pattern after. They had processes they could learn from. When I used to be a buyer in retail many years ago, I would have a merchandise manager. And as a young buyer, I would say, I think we're going to replace this line with that. And he would say to me, Ken, well, slow down. Are you sure? And he would impress upon me the importance of those ongoing relationships and how it worked. That was good because otherwise my enthusiasm would have been shaking things up. Sure. Mentoring's gone. So a lot of the people who your B2B salespeople are trying to sell to are in a lot of cases winging it, and they're not exactly sure what to do, and that makes for problems.
That makes for challenges. The one of the commentaries that people oftentimes make is that technology is something that's difficult for an organization to swallow. And I've heard it said in a number of organizations that sometimes the most difficult place to digest a new technology is in the sales side of the organization as opposed to, say, the marketing or the manufacturing side of things. What's your observation? One of your blogs is on selling technology. What observations do you have about the adoption of technology by people in the sales process?
Well, technology is tough for the sales organization to adopt, even if it's terrific, because the sales organization, unlike just about every other department, is not always in the building, is not working together on things. They tend to be islands. Sometimes they are separated by thousands of miles in many time zones. In a lot of cases, they are just working on their own projects. So, in a different department, if a new technology comes in and I'm having a question on how to handle it, I can call over to a friend and they can show me, no, do it this way, do it that way. If I'm in my remote office in San Francisco and my headquarters are in Boston or in Atlanta, and I'm not sure what to do, I'm a little bit lost. We now go also to the additional fact that salespeople don't get paid to learn and master new technology. Primarily, they get paid if they bring in the sales.
That's right, it's quota.
It's quota. And time taken away to learn about technology usually does not reduce your quota.
Right.
So I want to go out there making the sales. I've got other departments saying you need to learn this. It's a challenge. And it also is a new way of doing things. And salespeople, including the most terrific ones, are reluctant to change.
Now, in your work with sales organizations, large and small, I'd imagine that you'd come into contact with things that begin to feel like a generational difference or a generation gap between young salespeople and old salespeople. Young salespeople maybe who have grown up with social media technologies and are really comfortable with technology, and then you've got the old dogs, the old salespeople who learn to use the telephone maybe as their one and only tip of the hat. Do you see that often or frequently now in organizations, or is that not a problem?
Well, it's not a problem in that if you look at someone and you guess their age, you'll be able to predict how they're going to act. Where it is a challenge is what's management's focus on the right way to do things. For example, I have been brought into sales organizations where the salespeople primarily were sending out emails and wondering why things weren't happening. And I think it's real easy to understand why things aren't happening by sending out emails, because the person on the other end of the email is getting a lot of emails.
Right.
Okay, they're coming as a distraction. They're parading off the screen. They scroll away. Not only that, if I want to work on something, if I want to do something, I have to look at your email that I wasn't expecting anyway, push everything else aside, hopefully I don't get distracted, and then focus on it. So selling via email is arguably not a very effective way of selling, and we're really in a flux period. It's a big flux period where we're figuring out the right way to use the right technology and the right combination. A lot of people hide behind the technology, so they send out emails when really they should be on the phone in certain situations. In some cases, an old hard copy letter will accomplish things that a ton of technology couldn't.
Right, because there it's in your hands. It's not parading by, as you say.
And they don't get that many of them. Right. When's the last time you got a regular letter? I mean, they're so easy to do.
The last time I had a child in college, yeah.
There you go. And so is that the right tack? No, that's not the only way to do things, but there are some ways to reach the right people that require a little bit of creativity and not just going through the motions. That's the enemy of selling, is salespeople who are going through the motions and not using creativity.
Now, I've heard you use the expression words evaporate. And certainly in today's world, whether it's Twitter with its very tight rein on what people can say, or email or other technologies that use words, it would strike me that there must be some corollary to the notion that words evaporate. Why don't you
Okay.
pick up on that for a moment?
The spoken word disappears like smoke in the air the moment it's articulated. So if you and I were having this conversation without a video camera, and I had said something,
Thank
and you had
goodness
said
we are,
something,
right.
as soon as it's said, if you didn't capture it, remember it, assimilate it, and decide to take action with it, it's gone.
Right.
It's gone. In a lot of ways, the same thing happens for the onslaught of raw text. Who here doesn't get enough emails? You know, I remember I would ask when I give speeches, who here gets, you know, more than 10 emails a day? Joking. And very often the number would go up to 50, 75, 100 emails a day. People have to triage. Now, even if I have to spend only 20 seconds going through them, you add up the math, I don't want it. Not only that, I don't want emails from my salespeople, from people who are trying to sell to me, because that's not my priorities. So there's too much of everything, and somehow we have to find a way to become important to that person. Nothing will happen unless a salesperson and their key message, not 20 messages, but their key message or two, becomes important.
So then I should use things like PowerPoint presentations.
Sure, that's the answer. And why don't we? It's only 20 slides long, and they only each have 7 bullets on them. So what's 140 points? Yeah, PowerPoint is a marvelous technology, and when it came in, it changed the world, arguably in unpredictable ways. And it's when word processing first came in, companies said, "Here it is, do your own typing," and that worked. When PowerPoint and back then other technologies came in, companies said, "Well, we no longer need graphic artists. We don't have to make 35 millimeter slides anymore. Make your own slideshow."
Well, we had the Genographics machine, and that was the beast that you had to feed.
That's right. That's right. Before PowerPoint came in I'm going to say the early to mid 90s is when it really got locked in. The most powerful person in an entire corporation, the one who could tell the CEO, "No, you can't have that," was the graphic designer. Because they could say, "I'm sorry, you can't put more than 4 bullets on a 35 millimeter slide, even using our marvelous technology." And guess what? They had to do it. Then all of a sudden, slides came in. And the key about a slide is not about putting words onto the screen. It's about putting ideas into people's heads. And that is not something that comes automatically like typing.
Sure. It's not a skill that we're trained. We're trained to write and learn English or another language, and we know how to put together a sentence. But it's tough to communicate an idea.
It really is. And how often are people taught about how other people perceive? For example, when someone's giving a presentation, whether it's over the web or whether it's in person, who has been taught about a good way to start it? Now, I don't want to go too deeply into presenting, but when a slide comes up and it says, you know, the name of my company and, you know, why we're terrific, a lot of people just close up.
Sure.
So, for example, the best way to start something like that is with a question. What are companies learning from this or that? So there's a lot of ways of doing things using technology that are marginal. And they can use up a lot of time, and they can use up a lot of one's access.
Sure. Now, but to its credit, I mean, PowerPoint and other technologies did change things by making it possible for your presentation to travel, for it to move into an organization and have an impact after your departure.
And it still does. And it can really be very powerful, particularly if it is combined with some voiceover, or whether it's combined with some video clips, or whether it's combined with something that brings it something human. Too often, though, a salesperson will say, "I'll send you over the slide deck," and that person will now receive more slides than they ever wanted, slides that they can't make sense of on their own, and those are not going to travel. If I want to make you a hero in your company, I've got to somehow get something.
Which is your objective?
I'm not going to get the sale unless you have something that's big enough to make your boss and your boss's boss say, "This is worth the money." So if I want to do that, I can't just rely on words.
Right.
I've got to give you something that you can use so you don't look like a shill, you don't look like you're showing a commercial for me. That's what's going to have impact. And it touches every part of selling.
Sure. You know, it's interesting. It strikes me that with the sacrifice of the personal contact form of selling and the substitution of technology, you know, one of the things that got lost along the way was the opportunity for an organization to communicate its personality, the personality of the salesperson, the personality of the CEO, of the engineers, all of the people who are involved in making and distributing a product. And that's something that's been lost, perhaps, with technology. Are there ways back? Is there a way to bring personality back into the selling process?
Well, sure. We're at a point where the pendulum's swung this way in terms of just give them the raw text, send them to the website. Now, people are learning that's a marginal approach. So, I'm sorry,
That's okay.
I lost track of where we're headed, though. Yes, if I can get people back to the very human desire to connect with other people. That's really, we go back 100, 200 years, all right? Your grandfather made his living probably the same way his grandfather did. Your grandfather's grandfather did.
Sure.
Right? My kids are doing nothing pretty much the way I did it when I was their age. But deep within us is the desire to connect. People buy from other people. People have faith in other people. There's a saying, I'm not going to purchase something unless I look across the table and I see that person. So how can you use the technology to make that come alive? And that's really what we're doing these days.
That's what we're doing with video, for example.
We're doing a video. Imagine if a clip of this video could be captured. I bet you have imagined that because
I bet you we're probably going to do that for you by the time it's all said and done. Exactly.
This gives me, if I'm inside a company, a real powerful tool. If I've got even a minute and a half little clip, and I want to get on my boss's radar screen, I can easily say something along the lines of, I know that we've been told a mandatory 20% reduction in all purchasing, or 30%. But, boss, this is something that I think we need to actually invest in even more. I've attached a short clip that in about 2 minutes will give you an idea of the 3 reasons why I think this is the case. I can send that off with pretty good confidence, and my boss or boss's boss only has to invest a minute or two.
Sure.
And things can happen. Otherwise, it can die right there. If I can't give you the tool you need to get them involved, I can meet with you all day long. I can talk to you in emails for weeks and months. It's not going to happen.
Right. So the whole role of competition, I think perhaps too, the whole role of competition has changed with the advent of technology. We've seen the old axiom that everybody looks large on the internet. Everybody's global. Everybody's got this, that, and the other. Everyone can compete in every marketplace, when they're competing on the internet. How do you see that impacting the world of sales these days?
It has made it easier in a lot of businesses for new competitors to pop up and to seem quite legit. It used to be, if I wanted to seem big, I had to have all sorts of quite expensive brochures and booklets and materials professionally created and published. Now, it's not that hard to have a good-looking website. So how does that customer, remember, unmentored, that customer, how do they come to conclusions about you? It's a challenge. In fact, I have a client right now who has competitors coming on and saying, well, we're global too. But they're not. They're not. But to that customer, global, what's global? Global is global, isn't it? It's around the world. Well, no, it's not. So what we have to do, what we're doing now, is we're helping their salespeople explain, without saying bad things about any competitors, when we say global, here's what we mean. We've got people and engineers and analysts on the ground, living, working, knowing all the players in this region, that region, around the world. Some people say global when they only have people who fly over or they have a mailing address.
Sure.
So as you look at us and our competitors, now they're more knowledgeable. Now we've helped that customer become a more discriminating purchaser, which hopefully works to the detriment, to the advantage of that particular client.
So the challenge, it would seem, is then probably to really find the right way, the right technology or use of technology to differentiate yourself. Because everyone's going to send their PowerPoint deck. Everyone's going to send their written proposal. Everyone's going to do pretty much everything the same way because technology has leveled the playing field.
They all have the same tools, but how you use the tools is what depends on whether or not you're going to make a beautiful work of art or whether it's going to appear quite clunky. In the same way, if you look at the world of direct mail, there's an old business, right?
Sure.
Someone writes a creative letter, and it gets sent out to a lot of people. A lot of money is spent in the actual mailings, but the real key is the creative work.
Right.
So everyone had the same tools, the same envelopes and postage and letters, but those who could home in on what matters, what will speak to the customer, what's going to make something rise up to become a priority, they win. They've won. And the same thing is here. What we do when we work with sales teams is we encourage them to think like their customer. That's a real challenge because they've never been that customer. In fact, even if they were with that customer employed there a year or two ago, they're still not that customer anymore. Things have changed. But if I can get into your head a little bit and go, all right, busy person, got a lot of priorities, a lot of confusion, a lot of distractions, and I can then arm you with things that will have you self-motivated to champion this, armed to do it without taking too great a risk, and I can make the steps easy, we're going to win.
Now I can be a hero.
I want you to be a hero.
In fact, if you're doing your job as a salesperson, you're creating heroes every day.
Nothing's going to get bought unless someone can justify it. And an interesting thing, because sometimes we teach salespeople, how do you sell to senior managers, senior executives, C-class? Because very often that's where sales die. Because I work with lower level, it moves up, it's good, it's good, it's good. I finally get into the big meeting where the major decision will be made, and that senior executive has got some concerns I wasn't ready for. So we teach them how do you approach that. And the salesperson who understands and can sometimes even help their contact sell higher, because the contact doesn't know how to impress their
It's not their job
either.
to sell your product.
That's right. No, nor do they even know how, because they don't know how senior execs think either.
Right.
So if we can help them understand, senior executives, for example, they live slightly in the future. They're looking for competitive in the marketplace advantages, not feature benefits. They're looking for big, not little. That's going to be an interesting meeting. If a salesperson comes into a meeting, whether it's over the phone, on the web, or in person, and they're completely surprised when the senior exec hits them with something, it doesn't work.
They're dead. They're dead in the water.
They certainly aren't having a good day, or as good a day as they thought they'd have.
You know, one of the more provocatively worded blogs of yours that I saw recently was entitled, "What's the purpose of this sales call?" And I was intrigued by that because, you know, you would have thought, or one would imagine, that the purpose of the sales call is immediately known, right? But
Make money.
Make
Get
money.
the sale.
Sure,
Get the sale.
exactly.
What do I do? I want to get the sale.
But that's not exactly what you said. Why didn't you, I'd be curious if you share that with our audience.
Okay. I'm gonna lead into it because you made such a good build-up. Most salespeople know one way of selling, and it's not to their detriment. They learned one way of selling along the way, and they've been doing that. Unfortunately, it's been by informing, and the web has taken away that job. So these days, and companies talk, we want our people to be more consultative. Well, I will use you as a consultant if I see value in it. What's the job of a sales call? The job is to create desire. That's it. Now, at different points in the sales process, there's a different sort of desire you need. First meeting with you, I want to create desire for you to learn more, so I want to make sure you grasp some big benefits. So important benefits, not feature benefits.
Right.
And then as we rise up, it's different. When we finally get to meet with, if it's a major purchase, senior executives, I want to be creating desire for the advantages that you folks will have. I want them seeing themselves with it. I want them imagining, if you had this working for you right now, instead of doing it this way, your folks would be doing it that way, you'd be benefiting this way, this way. If people can envision themselves already owning and benefiting from your product, they're probably going to move ahead because it's in their own best interest.
You know, that's an interesting point because it's almost a rationale for why in the B2C world conventional advertising in media was so powerful, particularly around things like motor vehicles or other large ticket purchases, because people were really challenged at that last in the ad to put themselves in that car to really feel what it was like.
That's right. And actually, if you would go into the dealer, they knew how to do that too.
Sure.
They go
get in and take a test drive.
They do that, but they go, Mr. Phillips, can you imagine how this car would look in your driveway? Can you imagine driving up to a friend's house in it? And what they were doing, because the automotive business, they knew what they were doing because they'd done the same thing for so many decades. What they were doing is they were using your imagination against you. Because they don't know what your driveway looks like. They don't know what your friends' houses look like, but they've got you in that car driving up feeling good, and it worked. When you're dealing with B2B business, these are professional buyers, particularly as you get higher up. But nevertheless, they're all suffering in ways that they won't usually tell a salesperson because it's confidential.
Sure.
But if you can have them imagining, and particularly if you can have them appreciating what other companies are doing right now, then it becomes so easy for them to say, I at least think we should be exploring this. And if I can get them exploring it, then we're on our way to a sale. It's much better to have someone exploring something than to say, we're going to wait another 6 months. Times are tough.
Sure, sure. You bring up a point when you talk about the person on the buying side of any equation. And another one of your more provocatively worded blogs was entitled, "Can Your Salespeople Deliver a Stimulus?" And I thought that was a wonderfully shameless way of borrowing from the controversy in Washington. But you have a point to make in that blog posting, don't you?
Yes, it's that a lot of people out there, people with a lot of power to purchase and to guide their companies, have never been through this sort of times before.
The kind of economic uncertainty that we're in.
Absolutely. They have not been through challenges, setbacks. In some businesses, the whole world has changed. And it's very easy to panic. It's very easy, particularly if you've got young kids and a mortgage, to want to do nothing risky. Nothing risky at all. If the company says our goal is to not spend, a lot of people will immediately not do that. Now, they're not saying that. What the company's really saying is, we're not going to spend on something unless it's crucial and important into our future. The company still wants great ideas to come forth. The company doesn't want to close up shop. So sometimes the salesperson has to gently teach their contacts what companies are looking for. And the best way to do that is by talking about experiences at other organizations.
Mm-hmm. Sure, sure. I want to wrap us all the way back to the first question in the beginning, and it goes back to this notion of technology and the technology that can help and the technology that can hurt or impede.
Or distract.
Or distract, exactly, which is just as bad. Exactly, that's a good point. I'm curious, if you were to, just to use a baseball analogy, the season's over now, unfortunately for us, I suspect. But there's a baseball analogy that comes to my mind, and all of a sudden you're going to be the manager of the all-star sales team.
Okay.
Okay, the manager of the all-star sales
all
team.
Right.
Okay, what kind of technology bats would you want to have in the hands of your home run hitters?
Okay. I can't just say I want to hand them technology, because technology for its own sake can waste a lot of time. I've seen companies where they were sold a bill of goods that the answer to all of your sales problem is to bring in this marvelously complex sales, monitoring, technology, and your people put information over here. It was all internal. It didn't touch the customer.
Right.
So what's going to work is the technology that can touch the customer, and touch the customer in the way that in a lot of organizations, the CEO knows how to do. In almost every company, one of the best salespeople is the CEO. They can explain situations. They can get people excited. That's what they do. They do that all day long. They do it with analysts when they meet them. They do it at high levels. If we can take the salespeople and give them a little bit of that knowledge, of that comfort telling the stories, and then arm them with the tools to get it across. What's the right tool? It depends. If I can't get through to you at your company, if you're a company I want to crack into, I can't get to you, I can't just send you emails. I can't send you links. It's going to take me nowhere. I have to get creative. And there are creative things you can do in almost every business. So if I can get creative, now I get in to meet you, or I talk to you on the phone, I create a little interest, a little desire. I now feed you a little bit more. Maybe it's a link with a provocative lead-in, which you've been so good with in this discussion. Maybe it's a video. Maybe it's something that makes it easy. We're all familiar with the sales ladder, the whole concept of moving people up, up, up. The real concept, the real secret to the sales ladder is not the notion of moving people up. That's easy. The problem is that to the customer, you may not have the rungs they need. So if I said, come over to my house and help me fix my roof, and I bring out my ladder, and it's missing some rungs, you're going to go, I'm not going to do that. It's too risky.
Sure.
So the customer sees things differently. I want to arm my salespeople with the comfort, the knowledge, the tools, and knowing how to use them. That's going to make that customer go, oh, that's not too risky at all. I'll take this step. I'll take this step. And if I've got the right solution for them, I'm doing it with high integrity, a good percentage of them will arrive at the top of that ladder, and they'll become a sale.
Now, there's another thread I picked up at one point in your blog postings, and that was about the importance and the value of creativity. And I recall you telling a story about a phenomenal activity in the old days, back when you and I were younger and working together at Lotus. A phenomenal trick that was done one year at Comdex that literally used the shirt on people's backs to really command attention and to sell.
It was really, it's more of a marvelous marketing story, but it really shows you what some real good thinking can do. And there's a lot of bright people in every organization, and it goes like this. One year Comdex was coming up, and it was Borland that did this. Borland was a relatively small startup, not startup, but they were not as big as the big players, and they wanted to get people to their booths. Well, you could either spend a small fortune on a booth, or you could do what they did. They printed up, I believe it was 200 T-shirts, 200 or 300 T-shirts, and they then hired very attractive models, because the people going to Comdex typically were male.
Sure.
And they went to the airports, and they could at those times, and as people got off flights, and you could tell the profile of who's going to Comdex, they gave out T-shirts. And the T-shirt said the following: follow me to booth with a number to see Borland's, I forget the name of the product. So, the next day the show starts, and what happens is Borland has, walking through the show, hundreds. Oh, also, by the way, if you wear the T-shirt, here's the payoff. If you wear the T-shirt and we spot you, we may give you a $100 bill. There's the incentive. There's the incentive. So for, $1,000 or so in $100 bills, the T-shirts cost next to nothing. They had walking billboards going throughout that huge trade show, bringing business to them, and it prompted a new rule. The very next year, no longer would any sort of promotional T-shirts be allowed anybody trying to enter the place.
It's a great story.
You can bring creativity like that to a sales call as well. You go into a sales call or even on the phone by starting with a provocative question. That's creative. By saying, what are companies like? And you name some competitors or product or companies in their genre. What are they benefiting from, through this technology? It makes someone go, gee, I didn't know that. I don't know. Let me find out. So maybe I become more valuable to my company. And at the very least, I won't be vulnerable if a senior exec comes in and says, they're doing that. Why aren't we doing this?
Sure. Ken, before we sign off today, I know one of your favorite phrases is to sell like a CEO. And I'm sure you use that constantly, and thought it might be a good chance for you to share that observation, that meaning with our viewers.
Most CEOs know how to tell a terrific story. And they can, because let's face it, no one's going to say to them in the company, you shouldn't mention that. So when I come in to work with a company, very often one of the first things we'll do, even in the discussion stages, is I'll get to meet with the very senior executives, and I'll listen to what they bring up. I'll say, what are the challenges you're fighting? Because there's always challenges. And they usually have great answers. And I'll go, if we can just take the sort of things that I've heard at this table, because typically it's senior execs in the first meetings, and we can make it so that your people have this knowledge, access to it, we can shift the bell curve over. So all of your people, that's the whole goal. The whole goal is to get more sales, more effectiveness from the same people. If we can make them sell a little bit more like the CEO, the curve shifts over and everything works better. Every sales call is now more valuable to the customer, and therefore becomes more valuable to the company.
And brings in revenue, shortens sales cycle, and hopefully gives opportunity to a person like yourself. Thank you, Ken, for coming in today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you.